It's great to be Yeah, it's great to be here today, and to talk about, how we are assessing soil health potential across the U.S. Cotton Belt. This project that I introduced last year. We called the Soil Health Institute the U.S. Regenerative Cotton Fund. Um, oh, it says my screen sharing is paused. Okay, that was weird. Let me go back, try that again. Okay, it's not anymore. So today, what I want to talk about is that same project, but we've had a year of progress since I talked about it last time. So let me just get on to it. I want to acknowledge the authors of this work: Nate Looker, Bright Afari, Diana Bagnall, many others at the Soil Health Institute have contributed to this work. We have a pretty large team, and we also have a lot of partners that I will acknowledge in the coming slides as well. But these are all PhD soil scientists at SHI that are leading this work. So what is the Soil Health Institute? We are a small nonprofit. If you haven't heard of us, we are headquartered in Raleigh-Durham area, or in Morrisville, right by the airport. But we have almost 40 employees now, and they are all over the United States. A lot of those employees are associated with our U.S. Regenerative Cotton Fund, which is and they're mostly headquartered across, or mostly located across the Cotton Belt. Um, at the Institute, our mission is to safeguard and enhance the vitality and productivity of soil through scientific research and advancement. And I can't give a talk without a gratuitous, beautiful aggregated soil slide. So there you go. It's a picture of it looks like a Houston black clay, if I could say so, but I don't know what that is because it's not my picture. That's Nate Looker's picture. Um, but what I want to talk to you about today is how we are benchmarking and actually getting data on soil and improvements in soil in cotton across the U.S. Cotton Belt. So our benchmarking program, which is what we call it, we want to measure soil health to develop locally relevant resources for land managers and quantify the impacts of soil health management systems. And today I want to share with you what we are doing and what we have learned thus far. This work takes a lot of partnership. And our very valued partners that we have are with the U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol and Cotton Incorporated. We are partners with the U.S. Climate Smart Cotton Program. Chad Holtz is running that program. If you're interested in it, I have put his email up. And we work a lot with farmers and with the program, the enrollers, trying to give them information. It's a two-way street, sharing information and learning what we can so that we can serve U.S. cotton farmers. We also get support, both financial, emotional, and technical support from Cotton Incorporated to help to develop our soil health data portal and decision support system, which I'm not going to talk about today. Well, I'll mention it. A lot of this information that I'm going to talk about today is going to arrive in this soil health portal, farmer portal for decision support. So we're going to get our economic analysis, our data in there. When we go and sample on a farmer's field, right now, a farmer will get a report, and we want to create a portal so that you can log in, look at your data, look at aggregated data in your area, look at economics, and get technical information about soil health and soil health management systems. The other thing I want to do before I get going is acknowledge our other financial supporters. So first is with the U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol, the USDA Climate Smart Commodities program. But our U.S. Regenerative Cotton Fund is founding supported by Ralph Lauren Corporate Foundation. And we have other supporters, including the Walmart.org, the VF Foundation, Levi's, the Hearst Foundation, Cotton Incorporated, and of course, we have our key collaborators that I just talked about: National Cotton Council, Cotton Incorporated, U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol, and Field to Market. So first, I'll just remind us all, get us thinking about soil health and why we're interested in that. Healthy soils have both agronomic and environmental benefits. We know and have data to show that improved soil health increases plant available water holding capacity of the soil. It improves drainage, nutrient retention and cycling, organic carbon storage, trafficability to the soil. You know, lets you get out there a little earlier when in the spring if your soils are wet. And then environmentally, we know that improved soil health and soil health management systems will reduce runoff and reduce erosion. So one of the things, I'm a soil physicist. I know you hear a lot about soil health, about the microbes and feeding the microbes and getting the microbes to do a lot of the work for you in your soil management system. But as a soil physicist, I really want to emphasize the importance of soil health management systems and what they do to water cycling in the soil. They improve soil structure, and that's where we get that increase in plant available water holding capacity, better drainage, better nutrient retention and cycling because the soil has good balance of air and water in it, and also where the runoff and the erosion components are key indicators and improvements in soil health. Now, when we talk about managing for soil health, there are practices, right? You hear about the practices, they're cover cropping, double cropping, strip till, no till, reduce traffic or traffic controlling, cover cropping, again, residue retention, all these things. You know, you can graze your cover crops, you want to rotate. All these things are practices associated with soil health. But what we like to really, and you know, they're important and they have a lot of technical decision making to go with them, right? That perhaps are new if you have not been engaged in those practices before. But the way I try to really think about soil health is thinking about those principles because you have practices and they're all combined. You might do one practice, you're probably going to do multiple practices. You're going to integrate these practices to optimize outcomes for your cropping system, for your production goals, for your environment and your soils. And so the way I really try to think about it is thinking about those principles. We want to increase the number of days that you have living roots in your system because that gets the photosynthate and the sugars pushed into the soil, keeping the microbes healthy and those microbial communities very active. We want to reduce disturbance because you work so hard to improve the porosity of your soil and the rooting capability of the soil. And that reduced disturbance that you can do can help maintain that. And we talk about strip till and no till, and I had put it on there. So I can see now that the edits I made yesterday somehow did not get saved. But the other thing I have in there as a practice for reducing disturbance is controlled traffic. Just thinking about, we all know the yield hit that goes on turn rows, and turn rows just have to happen. But, you know, just thinking about, they're just a good example of how that increased traffic affect your yield and productivity. Want to increase that soil cover. NRCS talks about armoring the soil, and we could do that a lot of ways with cover cropping and residue management. And then lastly, increase that biodiversity. That's really important for pest control, right? With crop rotations. And then also even just think about grazing. And a lot of our partial budget analysis that I'm going to talk about in a minute, we actually have to kind of throw out the data on folks that graze their cover crops because it's a pretty big moneymaker. So, you know, not everybody has access to cattle or sheep, I guess. But in the Southeast, there are more animal systems, and so there are more opportunities to bring in grazing. And of course, the high plains of Texas does it quite a bit with the dual purpose wheat. So I mentioned a little bit about the economics, and I do want to summarize them. But if you are interested in those PDFs or in watching short videos about the economic analysis we've done, you can scan this QR code with your telephone and your phone. If you pull it up, scan the code, it'll take you to the link on our website, or you can just go to soilhealthinstitute.org. But anyway, I'm just going to give you a summary. As part of our U.S. Regenerative Cotton Fund, we have completed 2 sets of partial budget analyses. And these partial budget analyses summarize 8 farmers in a region. So we have the High Plains of Texas, or the Southern High Plains. And then we also have Georgia in the cotton peanut area, the coastal plains. And so each of those areas, we have 8 farmers that have adopted soil health management systems, and we have interviewed them about their management practices. And on average, we see an increase in net farm income for growing cotton. Also, those are the years that you have cotton acres of $98 per acre in Georgia and an improvement of $157 per acre in Texas. And those are for adopting soil health management systems such as no-till, strip-till, and cover cropping. And where does this increase in income come from? And it's about half and half. Half of it is additional revenue due to increases in yield associated with soil health management practices. And the other half of the increased income comes from reduced expenses. And I know I hear a lot of times, we do know cover crop seed costs money, but there are also reduced expenses that can offset that cost. And that includes reduced expenses in fertilizer and pesticides. So even though we have to terminate that cover crop, the pesticides, the weed management benefits that come with that cover crop are recognized in decreased use in pesticides later in the season. We also have a huge reduced expense in fuel and electricity and labor because we're not plowing. And then also reduced expenses are associated with equipment. You know, the equipment is smaller if you're not pulling a plow through the field, and the equipment, you gain that in fuel and labor, but you also gain that in reduced capital expenses. So half reduced expenses, half additional revenue, and that's what we're getting. And this is for 16 farmers, 8 in Georgia, 8 in Texas. And, about $100 per acre or more are recognized for farmers that have transitioned to soil health management systems. There are other benefits that are beyond that $98 and $157 per acre. And you look at the breakdown here in Georgia and the Texas Southern Great Plains. These are percent farmers that have responded yes to decreased capital expense of equipment. You can see that Texas farmers see more of them see a reduced capital expenses on equipment than in Georgia. There's about the same response for increased crop resilience, increased field access, improved water quality, increased soil organic matter, and improved public perception of agriculture. So these are all kind of benefits beyond just, well, some of them are associated with agronomics, but a lot of these are benefits beyond agronomics to those that have adopted soil health management systems in Georgia and Texas. So if we look across the Beltwide, these are cotton harvested acres in 2017. It's from the National Ag Statistics. And it's roughly 11.5 million acres. And so we think there's a real great opportunity for cotton farmers to think about adoption of soil health management systems, what that might do to their economics, and how it might actually improve their soil and their soil health. And at the Soil Health Institute, we really work hard on thinking about how we can measure change. I'm a soil scientist. If y'all ever get in the field with me, you'll see that I'm a bit crazy, and I'm very passionate about soil. I love soil. I enjoy digging in it. I enjoy looking at it. I enjoy thinking about it. And a lot of times these days I sit at my desk and talk about it. But really what we want to think about, if you treasure something, you want to measure it. And so we treasure soil, and we treasure changing management practices and agronomic systems to improve soil functioning. And when we think about that improved soil functioning, water cycling, nutrient cycling, carbon cycling, we need to measure it. And what we do at the Soil Health Institute is we're thinking about what are those soil health measurements that we can use to inexpensively quantify change. And the measurements that we have found through a big national study that we completed a few years ago is that we can measure soil organic carbon, carbon mineralization potential, that's 24-hour respiration, and aggregate stability. And these are the 3 measurements that we like to make that can be made at most commercial labs. So hence they're scalable, and they can be fairly inexpensive to make. In fact, aggregate stability, you can make yourself with your smartphone. we have an app called Slakes. And so if you go onto your smartphone into your app store, you can download that free app. You just type in Slakes, Slakes, and you can get going measuring your own soil aggregate stability. But one of the things that we recognize as soil scientists is that anybody can measure their soil health. But we know that peanut farmers in Georgia, peanut cotton farmers that are on really sandy soils, they can improve their soil health. But that change in soil health is going to be very different than a farmer in North Carolina. Different climate, different soils, different cropping systems. And we also recognize that that's going to change as your soil gets clayier, as you get carbonates into your soil, or your pH changes. We know that there's inherent local things such as regional and site characteristics and inherent soil properties. They're going to affect that soil health measurement. And that's why it's been a bit elusive thinking about measuring soil health at a national scale or across the Cotton Belt. At the Institute, what we've thought about is we want to sample what we call benchmarks. And what we do is we look at similar soils across a cotton growing region. So, like we look at Georgia, we look at soils and group them into soils that we think have similar soil health management responses. So, sandy soils, clayier soils, right? And we go out and we sample these soils, and we sample in what we call our benchmarks, our well managed perennial systems, and that are similar to those soils that grow cotton. And we also measure in soils that are that have soil health management practices. And then we're measuring in soils that are in traditional row crop management systems, what we call our baseline. And the reason why we want to get these different practices is we want to benchmark or reveal this innovation space that's set by inherent soil properties and site characteristics. A lot of times that's clay content and that's drainage, soil drainage. And if we can figure out like what's the best expression of soil health for this soil in this climate, then we can start comparing and figuring out where cotton soils are today. So I said we're benchmarking to these like soils that have cover and have perennial living, have living roots all the time. And then we also look at crop production systems. So we're assessing effects of soil health promoting practices in each region. Ideally, we want to look at soil health management systems that have multiple practices integrated over more than 5 years. But in reality, a lot of the regions that we're in, we're finding just one-off practices like reduced tillage is one of the primary practices that we can find that are used. And we can find a few long-term examples. But we are getting a spectrum of management practices across the Cotton Belt. And so we have this approach to benchmarking. So we want to provide cotton growers and other stakeholders with actionable regional specific evidence of their innovation space for soil health measurements and the progress that they have already achieved. So this is where we have had measurements so far. So in Texas, 3 major land resource areas, the coastal plains, the Blackland prairies, and the southern high plains. And then you can see the colors are the major land resource areas, and you can see the counties in black that we've actually made measurements in. In the Mississippi Delta, we've focused really on Mississippi and Arkansas. And then we have measured soils in the Black Belt of Alabama and some of the coastal prairie. And then in Georgia, a lot of the coastal plains that we've measured, a lot of cotton and peanut soils. And the way that we're thinking about the results of this work, so here we have on the y-axis, we have a soil health measurement. So this could be carbon, it could be aggregate stability, or it could be that respiration number. And then on the x-axis, we have some inherent soil property. A lot of times it's texture, so how much sand or clay that's in the soil, but also drainage class. So that's a mapped property. So in this example, we put up sand because this is Georgia. So in Georgia, we have soils ranging from 75 to 90% sand. And we have soil organic carbon on the y-axis. So this is the range of soil organic carbon. So that line there is a model. So it's the average of organic carbon in the cotton growing soils that we found. So this is row crop agriculture in Georgia. And we see that our organic carbon is below 1%, and it's ranging from about 0.8 to 0.6% organic carbon. Then in that same area in Georgia, in the same soils, we have our benchmark data. So this is how much carbon we know because we've measured it. This is not a model like a biophysical model or anything. We've actually measured a bunch of spaces that are in perennial systems. And this is where we benchmark. We know that those soils that grow cotton in Georgia can range from a little less than 1.5 to a little over 1% carbon. We could do the same thing for aggregate stability and get a very similar result. And so now what we have in between these row crops and the benchmarks is this innovation space. Now, two things I want y'all to take home and think about with this innovation space. One, we're not saying exactly where row crop farmers can get, right? What we've done is we've now bounded the organic carbon concentration for soils that grow cotton in Georgia. And one of the questions we have is how close can cotton growing soils get to this benchmark if they're under row crop management? And we also want to know what are the practices that get us to that benchmark. So that's one of the concepts we get from this. But another is if you grow cotton in Georgia, you now know how good these soils could look. So if you're interested in like a carbon program, or if you're interested in being in the U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol, you can, we have realistic benchmarking here. We're not saying that you can get to 2% carbon, or like in the Midwest, you can get to 5% carbon. You actually have information now to make a educated decision on what you think your goals are for growing your cotton. So let's look a little bit more practically what this means. If you're on a farm and we have, you're at 90% sand and you're at 0.8% soil organic carbon, then you don't have much innovation space. Your innovation space is about 2% organic carbon or 0.2%. That's about how much more you could expect to increase your carbon. But if you're at 75% sand and you measure 0.8% organic carbon, there is quite a bit of innovation space for you. You can get a 0.6% increase in soil organic carbon. So this just gives you some decision support to really be thinking about your soil and what it is capable of. And of course, I used carbon because that's just something organic matter that a lot of people are thinking about with carbon markets and climate smart goals. But we get the same stuff for aggregate stability as well, the same information. So if you have less sand in your soil, you have a 3 times larger innovation space than you do if your soil is really sandy. And we think that that's useful, locally relevant information that you can make decisions and you can assess your changes in management on. So here's another example. So the next question we had is, can row crop farmers get to that benchmark? And so here, what we have on the y-axis is kind of like a histogram. So what we've done is, first of all, on the right-hand side, that dotted line, that's your benchmark. So before you saw that benchmark increase with decrease in sand, well, now it's just, we've made everything relevant. So all of these different observations, which are the bars on the y-axis, these cropland sampling locations, they are relevant relative to the benchmark, depending on the sand content of their soil. So it's been normalized. And what we found is there are 3 farms or 3 farm fields in Georgia that we sampled that do meet the benchmark. And there's a whole range of farms that don't meet the benchmark, but they're relative distances to the benchmark. And here's the interesting thing. When we calculate a tillage intensity for these farms, what we find is the farms that are purple and blue are lower tillage intensity, and the farms that are yellow and green have greater tillage intensity. And what we're seeing is a preponderance of the top order of observations that we made represent lower tillage intensity. In fact, if you go to the first half of the observations that we made, there's only three farm fields that we measured that have higher or greater tillage intensity that are closer to those benchmarks. So we have some evidence here that soil health management practices are making impact. Now, the next step that we want to do is we want to go back and understand, how are these higher tillage intensity farms maybe practicing other soil health management practices, such as maybe a longer rotation in between peanuts, or even perhaps cover cropping as well. So we have tillage intensity, but remember there's multiple soil health management systems that are engaged in or soil health management practices that you can engage in a soil health management system. And tillage intensity is just one of them. So we were really excited and encouraged by seeing this data that came out of Georgia. Now, when we think about farmer reports, so those are kind of like regional reporting schemes that we're going to provide. And we think about these farmer-facing reports. This is the kind of information. If Soil Health Institute goes and collects soil on your farm, we will measure your soil health indicators. So here is an orange line that represents a single farm. On the x-axis, we have soil organic carbon again. And then each of these bars represents benchmarking soil health management systems in a baseline. And so what we can do is each farm that we sample, we can provide you with your information of what your carbon looked like compared to these other management systems. And this is a sample with 80% sand and 0.8% soil organic carbon. And these expected values, these bars with colors, are providing expected values of other soils with 80% sand in this area in Georgia. So your soil health management or your soil health data that's reported is very relevant to other soils in your area. And this is the value that we think the Soil Health Institute is providing with this kind of benchmarking data. So highlights from 21 and 23, our approach supports realistic goal setting by providing evidence of the potential health of cotton growing soils across different regions. We're defining this innovation space for soil organic carbon, aggregate stability, and carbon mineralization potential. It's roughly 1.5 to 2 times the current averages under row crop production. So it's really encouraging that we do have room and improvement, and we can make more improvement. The growers have reached their benchmarks in some regions by reducing tillage and adopting cover crops, and there is room for further growth-led innovation across all systems. Plans for the new year is that we're going to publish some of our work in peer-reviewed science literature. Probably not anybody on this call cares too much about that. We are publishing in regional reports, so all those different major land resource areas, we're going to have a publication out, and webinars on the learnings from these surveys in Texas and Arkansas. And we're going to continue to do these soil health surveys in North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, Mississippi, Missouri, Oklahoma, and California. And here's the map, y'all. We have soil health field days if you're interested in some of the data, but also in the technical aspects of soil health management systems. We're having field days in Mississippi, Texas, and North Carolina and Alabama. These dates are set. If you have interest in those, you can contact Emily Ball at the Soil Health Institute. Reach out to her if you want to talk to her about any of those field days. We have economic interviews going on across the U.S. Cotton Belt. If you're interested in being engaged in an economic interview, please contact Jessica Kelton. We definitely need more volunteers. Georgia and the Southern Plains of Texas are done. But every other state that you see highlighted here, we need farmers that have adopted soil health management systems. It's about a 45-minute to an hour interview on the phone, and Jessica will set it up for you. All you have to do is answer the phone and answer some questions about management. We don't check receipts. We just want to know what your management is today and how it has changed, and that's how we do our economic assessments. And lastly, if you are interested in your soil being sampled, we need your help. Please help us benchmark soil health in the Cotton Belt. These are the states that we are sampling. We give you a sampling window here for these southern states. It's April through June. And we have someone in charge of that. Her name is Minerva Durantis. She's also a soil scientist. And here's her phone number and her email address. And we'll send that out to y'all too. You can also take your phone and take a picture and scan this QR code to contact Minerva. She might be contacting you. And what you'll get is your free soil health test and report. And we have very stringent data privacy codes that we follow too. We will protect your data. We will protect your anonymity. With that, uh, I'm done, and I'm happy to talk about questions and hear y'all's comments and questions and thoughts.